And we're back. It's been a long time since we've been in front of a camera, other than the beef bit from Northern Ireland. Yeah. We've just been so busy lately. We've been working on all sorts of things. But this video, we're going to talk about Unseen Westeros. If you haven't heard about it, it's a fan project, but it's by 40 artists who are professional artists. They are digital painters. They are matte painters who work in the VFX industry. Lots of them have worked on Game of Thrones, have won awards for their work on Game of Thrones. And they've come together to create something like 80-some pieces of art inspired by the world of Ice and Fire.
They reached out to George, I believe, through the German publisher and got his blessing for the project, provided that it was a non-profit project, which is what it's going to be and has been. And after that, they also contacted us and asked for our blessing because of, obviously, our involvement with the world of Ice and Fire, and we were more than happy to give it. We love fantasy art. We love seeing these places imagined, in particular with these artists. Even though they have worked on Game of Thrones, the idea was very much to go from what is described in the world of Ice and Fire and try to visualize some of the places that haven't been seen.
Yeah, but despite the name Unseen Westeros, it's more than just Westeros. It's Essos, it's the Summer Isles, the Basilis, the Zephorios. We've seen all the art.
Yeah, amazing pieces.
Amazing pieces of artwork, things that, we never thought would be depicted. George has envisioned these places. Some of them he's, from the very start. Some of them are things that he created for the lands of Ice and Fire, and then for the world of Ice and Fire.
Some very fantastical places.
Some very fantastical places, especially out in by the shadow and in the shadow. There's a Kickstarter right now. We'll link it. They're raising funds. It's a very ambitious project. The idea is a 5-day art exhibit in Berlin, in this old power factory that's being turned into a sort of creative space. We want people to really consider throwing them some money, throwing some support. It would be fantastic if this happens. It would be such an amazing project from fans.
The exhibit is going to be free, of course. That was the
absolutely free.
The idea is that everyone's going to be able to come there and enjoy it. So obviously that takes some funds to put on a project like this, the scale of it. And we're hoping that if it goes forward, that we might be able to attend as well. Maybe do another talk about, we're going to be discussing some of the art here, just a little bit as a teaser, and then perhaps do something more when if the project gets off the ground, which we really hope it will.
Yeah, I think we're going to be attending, or at least one of us is going to attend. Maybe both of us. It depends on our situation, where we've got a puppy event to take care of. Linda's hoping she has a puppy event, and but certainly we want to be there. We would love to see fans there. We'd love to see it happen.
The first piece that we wanted to talk about is one of the ones depicting the Rhoyne and their cities. This one is by Benjamin Schulte, and we really like this one because a lot of pieces are beautiful, intricate landscapes. Some of them are a bit more dynamic and tell something of a story. Something's happening in them, and this one's a prime example. At first, you see foregrounded this great big dragon coming in, and obviously the Valyrians are attacking the Rhoyne and have decided to, get rid of them once and for all. And then you look a little longer at the picture and you realize that all those birds in the background are not birds, actually, because that was my first thought. Like, okay, there's a swarm of birds. Oh no, they're not birds. Those are all the dragons from Valyria.
Yeah, the World of Ice and Fire really provided a lot of new information about the Rhoyne and their conflict with Valyria. I mean, we had bits and pieces in the novels, but the World of Ice and Fire really, George wrote his Miriam of 10,000 ships and described the conflict that began with, first the Valyrians had colonies, they had Volantis, and it was all, the Rhoyne didn't seem to mind, but there were increasing problems, especially there were a number of turtle wars, for example, when sacred turtles were being killed by the Volantines, and this led to conflicts.
The Valyrians wanted to keep expanding.
They wanted to keep expanding. They were much more. They were an expansionist power. Initially, it was peaceful because the Rhoyne didn't have an issue, but as it became clear that Valyria's ambitions and the ambitions of its colonies in particular were to expand and to encroach on where the Rhoyne were and their way of life, it came to a head when Garin the Great, the prince of the festival city of Chroyane, which we will be seeing later, raised his huge army, 250,000 men, to put an end to this expansion once and for all. And it was a threat that made the Dragon Lords band together into the largest force they had ever, I guess, brought together of dragons. And now the Rhoyne, we learned, had water magic. They could, wizards who could summon up spouts of water from the Rhoyne and were able to combat these dragons, combat these forces, hold them off. But the Valyrians came with their enormous force of dragons, and the men burned, and Garin the Great, is, according to legend, was imprisoned and called down his curse that unleashed disease and destruction. It's so I love that art. I love the fact that it shows that. And I also have to say the other aspect I really liked is when I was looking at it is you get a taste of it here. You'll see it more in the next piece. How these matte painters work. They draw inspiration from everywhere. They draw inspiration from natural, landscapes. They draw from inspirations from, architecture in this world. So this one, I mean, I was looking at it and immediately thought, initially I thought, oh, it's kind of Moorish Moroccan, but I looked a little longer. No, it's obviously Indian.
Yeah.
The way they have these domes that are raised up, I don't know what it's called. I'm sorry, but in particular, I think this depiction of this Rhoynish town, fortress, whatever it is inspired by the Amber Fort. I've seen it in documentaries and things. This is near Jaipur in Rajasthan. Check it out, see what you think. I think it's a definite inspiration. I think that style is an interesting choice. When you think about the Rhoyne, I mean, obviously George mixes and matches. So the Rhoyne, the Rhoyne is like the Nile. You have this sort of Nile thing to it, and you have this sort of river culture that develops. But India, of course, has the Ganges, has its great river, and that was important to its development.
Most early civilizations.
Most
historic
rivers. You can look at Babylon and all of those places in the Euphrates. So India is not a bad choice for a place local for inspiration.
I think we'll probably be linking as well. They have put out some videos showing how they worked on this.
Yeah, we will actually, next one will feature one of those.
It's quite fascinating how they put the pieces together and create something new. This piece showing Lorath is a collaboration between Sven Sauer and Kirill Berabin. Sven is one of the organizers of the project and has also been working on the Game of Thrones VFX theme since season 2, and has, they've won awards for their work with the VFX, and he's been an integral part of that. And now he's putting together this great show of Unseen Westeros, and here they've also put out a video together showing how they created this image of Lorath, taking stock images and rendering over those. So this amazing stone maze started out as a stock photo of a cliff, which had these sheer cliff sides, which they then started changing around, tweaking, superimposing things on, and creating this fantastical city.
Yeah, Lorath is not at all what people might have expected.
No, I was surprised.
When George wrote Lorath, about Lorath in The World of Fire, now, we've said before, I mean, a little bit of the Free City stuff is us. A lot of it, especially like the really new stuff, is George. So Lorath has this very ancient, it has a pre-human, maybe, history with the maze makers who made these mazes, and they're all over Lorath. There are these strange structures and no one knows why. There's supposed to be others on Essos, and lots of theories about what they were, if they were related to anything. After them, the hairy men who are related to the men of Id populated it. The Andals came for a while. Colonists from Valyria, who were sort of a sectarian group who basically worshipped the blind god Boash, came there. And they're very, very strange people. The reason why Jaqen talks the way he does has to do with the religion there. A man does this, a girl does that. They don't use I, they don't use personal pronouns for religious reasons. And they've made their home within, they turned towns, they made towns inside this maze. So this depiction is really, really cool take on it. They may not be exactly what George imagines, but Game of Thrones isn't exactly what George imagines.
I mean, this is very much of an epic scale. I think perhaps some of them might not be quite as large. On the other hand, if the whole cities are inside of them, they probably need to be
enormous, yes.
Quite enormous, because this is certainly something that he could imagine built by, the maze makers might have been a race of giants or something to be able
Absolutely
to create
possible.
something like that.
And what I really thought about when I first saw it is I thought, this would be great for the Stone City. This is George's wonderful story set, in his Thousand Worlds setting, his science fiction setting. He actually, I was looking around for a little bit and actually saw him refer to it. I mean, he considers it one of the best short stories he ever wrote, and it is fantastic.
It is.
And it's set in this planet that has a strange, ancient, prehistoric history with people who are long gone, who left this enormous labyrinthine city behind, and wandering aliens have come across it, have used it as a port, but there's strange things happen there, and it's a really great piece of art. It's very evocative, I think, of what George was aiming for with the maze and this weird
given his tendency to reuse elements that he enjoys as part of his stories, he almost certainly was thinking of his Stone City story when he created Lorath. I think there is a relationship there.
Absolutely.
So, very fitting image.
As promised, next is Chroyane, one of the depictions by Falk Boye. I'm guessing as is the name said. He's another professional artist. He's worked on 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, part of a team that won Visual Effects Society Award. And there's also a process video from him on the Adobe website. Some of these process videos have shown up on Adobe's website. Adobe, premier software company behind Photoshop, Premiere Pro, all these other pieces of software that are used heavily in the visual effects, art industries, design industries. They promoted Unseen Westeros with all these fantastic videos, including a series of videos showing how one of the artists actually, sort of as a tutorial, basically. And here we see Chroyane, which is this Rhoynish city.
Yes, the city of Garen the Great, the festival city, as it was called. It was supposed to, be in this amazingly beautiful place, sort of the pearl of the Rhoynish Empire in many ways. And we see it as a ruin in A Dance with Dragons. It's this, terrifying place now after the curse that Garen called down. You've got the stone men on the Bridge of Dreams, and it's the mists and the mystique of it. I mean, they feel like they're going in circles. There's something strange happening with the river, and they just come back to where they were. So something weird is happening in this previously beautiful place. And when we worked on an article for the book Beyond the Wall, which was sort of discussing various aspects of George's writing and the setting, we took the title from Chroyane, and it was called it used to be called the Palace of Love, is now the Palace of Sorrows, obviously after its destruction. And there we talked about the importance of ruins in George's work, not just The Song of Ice and Fire, but other things, things that have been left behind, things that have been destroyed and decayed. He's obviously not the only writer to be greatly fascinated by it, but it has a particular resonance for him. And so it's very interesting seeing this juxtaposition of seeing Chroyane as it was, because we've also seen depictions of it as a ruin.
Absolutely. In The World of Ice and Fire, we actually had the depiction of the Bridge of Dream in ruins, and that was very cool. And so kind of seeing it, and I think we were supposed to be seeing the bridge here in this piece of art, connected, I guess, to the Palace of Love. I'm going to guess that's what the artist was thinking. It was really impressive, and I'm really impressed with this sort of. It gives a very different take. Obviously, the artists are not one of the things when George always works with artists is a lot of the time he says, you know, he gives artists a lot of latitude
Yeah.
to depict things according to what's in where the muse takes them. So any artist even artists who have officially been hired to work on things like the calendars or the World of Ice and Fire, they've been given a lot of latitude to kind of imagine things as just what comes up to them. So here, there's more of a distance. George is not directly involved in these, but here each artist is basically, what do I imagine when I read about this, when I think about this? So this is not the same as the earlier piece in terms of the Indian inspiration. Yeah. This has, it's a bit of Greek, Roman, Romanesque in particular, I think, sort of medieval, like you think of the Romanesque, you know, Ravenna, basilicas and things. It's got a bit of that, but at the same time, there's these obelisks along the river, which are really great because obelisks are very Egyptian, ancient Egypt, the Nile again, making that connection. So I thought that was a really interesting combination of things.
And also seeing how two different artists can take different things out of the same description, because the descriptions that George provides, they're not, you know, exact, like you do this, you use these influences, and it is a description in the World of Ice and Fire, and you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. You can look at other things that have been said about the Rhoynish culture, and you can, you know, make your own conclusions and put them into the art.
It's a really polished image. I mean, look at the process video at Adobe's site. It's really cool because, I mean, he uses 3D art. He used 3D programs to kind of lay out the layout of the town, and then he started drawing on top of it. It was really cool.
The next piece, showing the Summer Isles, is quite different from these grand cityscapes. It is created by Martin Hundle. Apologize if my German isn't all that good. And we don't really have any of these great cities described from the Summer Isles. So instead, the artist has looked at sort of a village and a bit more of a daily life depiction. And you've got these thatched huts, which obviously are very African inspired. And then you've got this intriguing frog statue in sort of a center of the village, or looming over it, one might say.
Yeah, George has a detail in the Basilic Isles of the Isle of Toads in the Basilics, which has one of those oily black stone creations, a giant toad statue. I think the artist was just kind of looking for what sort of this sort of jungle, you know, culture, what animals might be, you know, significant, what might have be able to fit a religious meaning. So I think they went with the frog or toad as it happens, but it's I really like it because it is more of this sort of slice of life image. It's not something really dramatic. There's a person carrying some wares on their head, going about their business. There's this, and it's kind of got this African sort of thatched hut, sort of native construction, but at the same time there's something fantastical about the shapes.
Yes, it's true. The shapes, I think, in particular, there's something very organic, more so even than...
I felt like mushrooms.
Yes,
like weird
yes.
And also, I keep thinking there's something from the Star Wars universe as a little like this, and I don't know quite what it is. It's not like maybe some bits of the expanded Mos Eisley in whatever they call it, the extended edition, special editions of I don't know. Anyway,
it did remind me of something, I had to say, especially with the statue.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm thinking of maybe some of the some elements of the Arcadia in The Longest Journey. I know they had some fantastical little villages like that.
That's possible. That's possible.
But it's a very cool take, I think, on the Summer Isles, showing something very different.
And again, the Summer Isles are an area where we learned a lot of the information on Life and Fire. George wrote quite a good bit about how the islanders were preyed upon as a source of slaves for a time, how they freed themselves, how they are the greatest navigators and explorers in the world, and they have this society that is pretty great sounding society in which warfare doesn't really exist. There's ritual combats with very few fatalities, and basically if you lose, you go into exile, and that's it. Which I always thought was really interesting because Jalawar Zo comes off looking very badly because he clearly lost the conflict, went to exile, and rather than saying, okay, I lost, that's it,
He's trying to circumvent
that and bring barbarians, essentially savage warriors, to take over on his behalf, which is not good. So,
but it's interesting. It gave a very different light.
It gives a very different light to him.
Yeah.
And one more piece.
And for last, we have Stygai by Ziga Kaiser. And Stygai Kaiser is another of these VFX artists who've done a lot of work, and not just on A Game of Thrones. He's also worked on Guardians of Galaxy 2 and The Black Panther. So, again, very experienced, and he's obviously being quite inspired by what little there is about Stygai in the world of Ice and Fire. It's definitely one of these places that George wanted to leave you with just a hint of how fantastical it is, and not say too much because it is a mystical place, but it's very evocative what he does say, and clearly something that inspired artists.
Yeah, I really love this mark of artists, and the name, of course, the guy Stygian, which is a word for night, black, pitch black, I suppose.
Derived from the river Styx.
River Styx, yes, that's right. And I think, yeah, that's correct. And then wasn't Stygia supposed to be sort of the something to do with it was a term for the lands around the Styx or something? I don't know.
I think so, and I mean they using it for something that's dark and shaded, basically, and
obviously I think George, and more particularly because we see when he was creating all these strange places in Essos, he was drawing inspiration from things that he had read. There's a lot of Lovecraftian stuff thrown around in there, and there is a bit of Robert E. Howard, Conan and the Hyborian Age, and there's a country called Stygia in the Hyborian Age, this dark sorceress place that they worship the serpent god Set and Thoth-Amon, this sorcerer king who's mentioned but is not that important in Howard's stories. He's kind of indirectly seen a couple, but the various writers like Lynn Carter, who wrote pastiches inspired by Howard of Conan, kind of turned Thoth-Amon into sort of Conan's chief rival, basically, and his chief nemesis. So an important place, an evocative place, lots of stories written there. I know there's a Marvel comic where Belit is supposed to kill one of the sorcerer kings, and anyways, obviously an inspiration. Now, Ashai, of course, is known as also Ashai by the Shadow. And I recall when George wrote, so we first heard of Stygai, not for the World of Ice and Fire, but some years earlier when George was sending in the maps for the lands of Ice and Fire.
That's right.
I remember I was coming back from London, I believe, from the junket for Game of Thrones. I forget what season it is, 3rd, 4th season, and one of those. And I was starting to get these images sent in. I was looking on my iPad at them, and George was writing notes explaining details about some of these places. And Stygai, he wanted to point out, Stygai is actually in the shadow. Ashai is by the shadow. Stygai is in the shadow.
So if you think Ashai is dark and creepy, then Stygai is like a notch above that. It's by this river called Ash.
It's kind of sickly, the waters are. Something's happened.
Yeah, it's supposed to be full of demons and ghosts. Even Shadowbinders don't want to go there.
It's a ruin. It's not. It's a ruined city. It's an ancient city. People are scared to go there. It's what's happened. Who made it? No one knows, or at least no one that we know knows.
No, and I like the choice. I mean, green tends to be the color of something sickly and something wrong in a lot of fantasy, and the picture has this eerie green feel to it, and obviously that probably a little bit inspired by Minas Morgul.
Yes, in the Lord of the Rings, I recall this, that you see Minas Morgul briefly, and I think it must be Return of the King, and there's this sort of eerie green. I mean, green as the color of magic and sorcery goes back at least to, in cinematic terms, I mean, I think of John Borman's Excalibur, where when the color green shows up, there's something magical happening. On the other hand, there's this pale light you can see above. Now, the reason it's called the Shadow is the Vale of Shadow, is this deep mountain valley surrounded by these really high mountains. And basically the idea is that at the depths of this valley, you only get direct light from the sun when it's at its zenith, more or less. Most of the rest of the time, it's in shadows. There is no direct light. Obviously, I don't know how realistic it is. I do recall that isn't there some little village in like Austria or Switzerland that had to arrange for some giant mirrors to actually put in some light in the central square, because it is actually so shaded by the mountains around it, but it doesn't get much direct light, and people weren't feeling well, basically. So
you wouldn't.
No. So it is kind of like that. It's a strange place. It's pretty much at the very edge of a knowledge of maesters, as many of the lands depicted here in this Unseen Westeros exhibition are. Really amazing to see it. I hope that the exhibit goes forward. I hope fans consider joining the Kickstarter. You know, I think there's a level at $69 where you will get a copy of the book, the catalog, so you can see all the art yourself. And
I mean, just the idea of seeing these pieces large.
Yes.
Being able to appreciate all the detail and all the work that's gone into them. Some of them are so very epic that seeing them in a large scale would be absolutely fantastic, and an experience that I definitely hope that we will get, and many with us.
Yeah. So, fingers crossed. Again, check out the Kickstarter. Think about contributing. Make it happen.